Well, everyone, here we are, part 16. I'm almost beyond words here. I had no idea that this series was going to stretch out to anything close to this length. But again, my purpose was to keep it conversational and keep it going. And to those of you still around, thanks for your patience. But we are finally up to a point on these rough fuselages now where we can cut out the wing saddle, the hatch, and the aft platform for the horizontal stabilizer. And that's what we're going to do here in episode 16. Hard to believe. Stick around, folks. Okay, everyone. Now it's time to do the cutouts. And I think that I've mentioned these little cradles before. Just scrap foam cradles. They protect your model. They get it up where you can work on them, hold them nice and firm. And they're free. What's not to like? I mean, just cut them out of scrap foam and you're all set. I'm going to use it when we do this. But first, I need to show you how to attach the templates. It's pretty easy, but there is a pitfall or two that you have to watch out for. Now, because this template extended beyond the nose, there was no way to line up this first line with our datum line on the fuselage, which we were careful to maintain throughout the whole process. So the way to get around that is that you cut a little peephole in the side there so that it allows you to see that datum line. And then you keep that datum line lined up perfectly, and that's extremely important with the wing saddle. If you don't get these on there right, you'll know the airplane will sit side to side. Don't do that. So get it on there and lined up correctly. Now the other thing is how you attach it to the fuselage. You might think that, oh well, we'll just tape that thing around nice and snug, but don't do that either. You tend to lose geometry if you pull these templates up too tight this way. You're distorting the plane view because these were all laid out in 2 dimensions so that you're seeing it from the side, and that's the way that it's got to be cut, is from the side. And if you wrap these around, you start losing that plane view. You're not in plane anymore. You're wrapping it around. Now a little bit won't hurt, and as you'll see, I've got these pulled together with tape here in the front and in the back, and also I've put pins in here because we're going to come down on this with a hot wire, and this is just cardboard, so it needs to be held so that it won't slip or move, especially when you come down and cut it. One other thing, other than alignment, you've got to get these things aligned right. One other thing that makes it easier to cut, of course this one on this side is not blue because it's blue on the inside. But one thing that makes this easier to cut when you do with the hot wire is to come down on the large curvature first and then let it ease out the back where the curvature is less. So we're going to start the cut from here in the front and then come back and up and out, and that should cut a perfect wing saddle every time. This is also a place where our little rest here is going to come in handy. Now I'm using again the same lightweight bow. This is just a little lightweight bow. This thing weighs hardly nothing, and it's going to be very easy to manipulate. And we're going to keep it in touch with the cardboard the whole way around. And again, this is all pretty easy to do. one more time, I'm going to take a practice cut in scrap foam, because just as we did when we cut out the fuselage sections, you want your wire to be 3 bears right, not too hot, not too cold, just right. You want a little bit of a drag on it so that you can feel it going through the foam. If it just dashes through, you have no feel, and you're also burning and hardening the foam, makes it hard to shape later. So it's got to be 3 bears right. Well, this is just a tad hot, so I'm going to turn this down just a bit. For those of you that are wondering, it's about 2.5 amps that it takes to get this little bow just right. Okay, so that could go in the scrap bin, and now we're ready to go. It's very important to keep this flat across here because you don't want to be cocking it up, down, right, or left. I'm going to put my thumb up here in the front just to hold this firmly, and not to run the hot wire into my thumb. I've done that before too. So here we go. Again, it just takes seconds. You drop it straight down, keeping it firmly in contact with the cardstock, coming all the way back. And here's where you cut through the foam, and you cut through all the adhesive that you put in there, and it just keeps right on going. If you used the adhesives that I spoke of when we did this. Okay, now here we go. Almost done. We're back to the back and out. And there we go. Now that's falling off because I was very careful to keep the adhesive away from this outside. Remember when we stuck all this stuff together, you don't want the adhesive on the outside. So there we are. Turn the hot wire off. Put that up. Now we got a nice clean cut there. Perfect cut. No wire drag. Let me get this off right quick, and then we'll take another look at the fuselage. You can just leave this tape fold over on there because what it does is it just stiffens up the cardstock for when you use it next time. Let me take these off. And these pins played in smaller models, like for instance the P47 that I've shown you a bunch of times earlier, didn't really need these pins because the cord was not this great. But when you're using just cardstock as a template, it's pretty flimsy. So you want something in here to support that wire because you do have to press down on it to keep it in contact. Okay, here we go. Now, there is a perfectly cut wing saddle. That will fit like a glove when we do the hot wire cord wing. And again, you'll be amazed. You won't be able to slide a piece of paper into the gap. For those of you that build balsa models, you will understand what I'm talking about when I say that sometimes it's very difficult to get a perfect fit on this wing saddle. Well, now you got a perfect fit. So what I'm going to do next is get set up, and then we'll cut out the hatch, and then we'll cut the tail end Charlie out back here, and we will be done with the major cutouts. After that, I want to speak very briefly about filler because these have to be filled. Then of course we've got to talk about the plywood firewall, And we also have to talk about the canopy, which is going to come up in a separate episode. But for right now, we're still dealing with the fuselage. So as Larry, the cable guy, says, let's get her done. Okay, once again, we're all taped up. The pins are in here to support the wire on both sides. The cut is going to be made above the datum line, of course, on this one. Remember when we were back doing our CAD stuff, we wanted the floor on the inside to be below this cutout for the hatch, and that's what it's going to be. So taped on again. It's not quite so crucial that you keep everything in plane for this cut, because we're not going to be matching an airfoil to it. We're just going to be matching this. And not only that, but once we make this cutout, we're going to line it with balsa to make it more robust and not subject to chipping up or anything like that as foam would do. So we're going to have to do some adjustments on this anyway. And when we take this off, we're going to have to take whatever the thickness of the two pieces of balsa is that we put in here to line this. We'll have some on the hatch and some on the bottom where the hatch matches to the fuselage. But right now, we need to cut it out. Once again, these cradles are really handy. Now on this one, instead of coming down in the back and forward, this vertical cut would be tend to be the most difficult. So in this one, we'll do that vertical drop, do the vertical drop here, and then we're going to come back. What I'm going to do first is get this aligned just a little bit better. There we go. There we go. We're going to do the vertical drop, come to the back, up the slope, and out. So here goes. Again, keeping it in contact. I'm going to go ahead and tape this closed because this is awfully flimsy here. Just let it ride, let the wire ride the cardstock. Make sure it goes all the way to the bottom. You don't want to start pulling backwards until you get to the bottom on both sides. Okay. Unfortunately, I hit one of the pins that I just put in, but once again, an imperfect cut here is no big deal because you're going to have to do a lot of shaping and removing of foam anyway, just to make the hatch fit. Oops, come out of there. You see I got just a bit jagged, but again, that's going to come out because whatever thickness that I choose to line the hatch with to make it sturdy, whatever thickness that I need to put on this is going to have to come away from this foam anyway. So there's the hatch. There's the cutout for the hatch, and as you can see, there's the floor. Now we'll put a piece of balsa down on this floor when we mount all the electronics. There's a world of room in here. I mean, a ton of room. You could mount anything in there you want. We're going to try to keep the weight down, of course. Now, you'll also remember that when I put this plastic tube in from the back, I told you to be very careful when you do that, that the end of the tube is facing down so that if you were to hit it with a hot wire coming through, it would press down. You don't want to get this caught up underneath your hot wire as it goes back. that would be well, not a catastrophe, but it would be a real pain in the ass to fix. But this was all pointed down to begin with, and it continued, and just, if it contacted the wire at all, which I don't think it did or it would have burned it, if it had contacted the wire at all, it would have been pushed down further. So now there is the cutout for the hatch. Last cutout coming up. And here we are, ready for the final cut. Now this is an instance where two things had to happen. Number one, I had to make a small cutout to allow the control tube to pass through the template. Number two, I had to cut another little window in the template to pick up the line, because the template extends beyond the end of the aircraft. This is also an instance where tape can't be used. There's nothing to tape to back here, so the cut has got to be supported by pins. So there you have it. We're going to make that long cut. We're going to retain some of the foam that we cut away back here, because the stab is just going to sit up here. But we'll retain this to glue it back in, just to act like filler. Want that resting good and solid. Actually, I'm going to pull this back here because I don't want to run the wire into my foam rest here. But this will be a very quick cut. All you got to do is drop straight down till it's resting. On the card templates, and away you go. And out the back. Perfect cut. Again, we'll retain this because we're going to have to use part of it as filler after we set the horizontal stabilizer inside. So there you have it. That's the final cut on this fuselage. Let me not get my mic tangled up. I've done that before too. But what we'll talk about in the remainder of this video now is filler, and I'll give you a couple of recipes that I found that work for me, because of course in order to do these cuts we couldn't put any filler on this foam. That would really mess up the wire's ability to go through it. We just wouldn't be able to do the cuts. It would hit some of this hard filler, and that would be that. The wire would stop, and so you don't want that. So what we've got to do, because again this is EPS foam, and EPS foam is full of big divots. I don't know if you can really see on the video just what it's like, but although the fuselage is shaped, maybe I can show you if I turn it to the light just right. But again, because it's EPS, some of the little foam beads tend to pull out. So the fuselage, whether you can see it or not, has a bunch of little divots and holes. Well, those of course have got to be filled up, and then the final sanding occurs. So right now what we have is a hatch. We've got a wing saddle. Now this looks like it's pretty flimsy, but believe it or not, that's pretty strong. And once that wing is epoxied in, this thing gets to be strong, very strong. So once we do that, like I said, I'll give you a couple of recipes for filling this foam, and then we'll talk about that. We'll go on to the next stage. After smoothing the fuselage, we'll put a ply former on the front end, and we'll talk about how to do the cowl. So that will come up next. But now let's talk about filler. Okay guys, I want to take just a moment to talk about filler. We're going to talk about just a couple of different formulations. There's a lot. I mean, there's stuff that you can come up with from everyday items. But the ones I want to talk about today we'll talk about them from a hard filler that makes a harder surface down to the softer fillers that makes a softer surface and that's easier to sand. We'll start off talking about the harder ones. This is a product called water-based sanding sealer. It's made by Parks Company and available, I think, at Lowe's. Also, if you'll go on RC groups, you'll see a formulation very much like the one I'm about to tell you, using Minwax polyacrylic, which I've tried and I hate, but that's just my personal opinion. For a hard filler, this is hard to beat. You take about a third of this, about a third of talc, which is this can right here. I got this from Aero Marine. It's a little bucket of talc. And by the way, talc, if you go to Wally World and buy baby powder talc, make sure you read the label, because a lot of baby powder talc nowadays is not talc, it's actually cornstarch, and you don't want that. The other thing is lightweight spackle, very lightweight spackle. You pick this can up and it feels like it's empty. This one is by Red Devil. So lightweight spackle. Durham's we'll talk about in a moment. So about 1/3 of this, 1/3 talc, and 1/3 spackle, and mix it to a paste consistency. Now I've got a couple of mixes here I want to show you before this stuff starts setting up. This one is right. That's a paste. That's what you want. This one is too liquid. See, it's dripping. You don't want too liquid. That's too liquid. This is a different formulation, but we'll look at this first. Here's what you want. You want a paste, something that looks like that, to that consistency, because what you're doing is when you put this on, and I've put a little bit on here already, when you put this on, you want the filler to penetrate down into these divots and pores in the foam, but you don't want a lot up on the surface because that's just going to have to be sanded away. So you want it in the divots, but you don't want it on the surface. If you make it too thin, what happens is that, like liquid, it follows the curvature, it follows the divots, and it will put a little bit of that filler in there, but then you've got to put on another coat to finish filling them up, or another coat, or another coat. This way you can go over it, if you've got it the right consistency, you can go over it one time with this paste and it will fill, and then you sand it off. So don't do this. That's too thin, that's too thin. So get it the right consistency. Now let's see, where was I? I had to do that because we're standing here in a air conditioning stream and the air is making this stuff thicken up on me. So back to this. Hard, this is the hardest, and as I said, it's also the hardest to sand. The next hardest, this is a product called Podge. It's really, really good stuff. I love it for a lot of things, and we'll be using it here later. When one of these aircraft I'm going to cover in paper, maybe tissue, and Podge. It's like decoupage, and it sands real easily. I prefer the matte finish. Good stuff there, but you can also make up a Podge filler, and it's very close to the same formula. This one was just a small amount of Podge and some spackle. Podge is the carrier, the spackle is the filler. Now it's a little bit lighter in color, so if you're going to do a light aircraft, that works out real well. And once again, you don't want this stuff dripping. Okay? You want it thick enough to spread easily when you put it on foam. And let's try this. And a credit card, I mean, old credit cards are wonderful things for this. When you spread it, you're putting the filler in the divots and not piling up this stuff on the surface. And that gives a real smooth finish. And Mod Podge is much easier to sand than any of the formulations using sanding sealer or Minwax polyacrylic. Now, as you can see, that filled those pores pretty well. That will sand down very nicely. You, again, don't leave big wads like that on the surface. You're just going to have to sand through them, and you risk sanding through the areas adjoining that big wad of stuff you left. So that works out real well, and it goes on very easily. Again, that's Mod Podge and this. The filler that I prefer and I use the most, however, is the last of these, and it's the easiest to sand. It's the softest, but you put a big glob of the lightweight spackle in a cup, add water until you get it stirred up to the consistency of thin mayonnaise. I mean really thin mayonnaise. When you get it to the thin mayonnaise stage, start adding water putty until you get it to the paste stage. And I've almost scraped this up so many times now that I don't have any left, but that's paste. You don't want it to be, this is getting better all the time because it's getting more solid, but this is still too wet. This mixture here is still too wet. Okay, if it falls off your stirring stick like that, that's too wet. So make a fairly dry paste to put this on. Not too dry, not too wet. Again, it's the three bears. You get it too dry, as you're trying to put it on the fuselage, it dries and starts literally just falling off. The binders don't have enough liquid to bind to the foam. But if you get it too dry or too wet, then you're not filling the pores correctly. So it won't take you long to figure out how to mix this stuff up to get a good consistency and a good repeatability. So that's about it. That's all that I'm going to talk about as far as fillers. I'm going to use the mix that I spoke of, the Durham's water putty and lightweight spackle. That's what I'm going to use on my fuselages because it sands easy and I'm lazy. So that's what we're going to go with. All right, enough talking about filler. You make up what you can use and what you prefer. Those formulations I've tried. I know they work. So pick one and stick with it. Okay, everyone, that's going to bring this particular episode to a close. When we return, I'll have done a couple of things. And of course, if you're following along, you need to do that too. I mentioned earlier when we did the cutouts that the cutouts are going to have to be lined with balsa. So come in and glue in balsa all around these edges, up the back face, up the front face, down the sides. What you want is this to have a hard protective edge. It's going to be attached with magnets. And you need that protective edge down there just to keep the foam from eventually flaking away. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to do that before I put the filler on, because of course the balsa is going to have to be sanded down too. So we're going to get the balsa on it, balsa lined lining for both of these, and the filler. So that will be done when we come back, and I'll show you the progress then. Thanks for hanging around.